Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum class. Welcome to English grade 11. Students, I hope that you are following the previous lectures. Today we are going to cover yet another SLO of our English 11. This is our Unit 3's SLO and it will be called our lecture number 7. Let's read the learning outcome and see what we are supposed to learn and practically do today. So, evaluate how authors use language, including figurative language, considering the impact on the reader, and discuss others' reading critically, taking account of their views. So, we are going to divide the learning outcome into two parts. First, we will see that how, when we are talking about any written material, now we use language, but we also use a little creative language, a figurative language that involves figures of speech like simile, metaphors, personification, etc. Now, when you are reading a poem, let's say, you can see that the figurative language is used heavily by the poet. And all these different figures of speech, they can be found in the poems, no matter if the poem is of one stanza or contains multiple stanzas. So today we will be analyzing a poem and seeing that how it is applied on the poem. Now, first, let us talk about what is a figurative language. A figurative language, my dear learners, is a language that shows creativity, that has such effect in your reading that as a reader you feel very much affected by it and it will leave a very good impact on you as a reader. The author or the poet uses this language, this kind of language, figurative language, which is not meant to be taken literally but rather figuratively, because you want to clearly go into the details and then understand it. So it means that it is not a simple language, it has some techniques and some categories. Now we will be discussing that and seeing a poem that we have under discussion. Yes. I hope that you are familiar with these different kinds of figures of speech. You must have read it in the previous classes. Now let's put that into practice. Now first, a figure of speech is a creative use of language to generate an effect. Yes, there are so many figures of speech. They are used in the figurative language to make the effect and show creativity of the poet. Some figures of speech, they are metaphor, simile, and metonymy. They are found in everyday language. But there are more figures of speech. Now, what did we learn? We learned that figurative language refers to language that contains figures of speech. Yes, we need to learn the figures of speech and how they work, and with examples to understand and analyze any poem or any written text in terms of the figurative language. Figures of speech are the particular techniques. All of these metaphors, simile, personification, they are techniques which elaborate the figurative language. Now, let's read this poem by Ralph Waldo Emerson. The poem is titled Water, and it has this one stanza complete. The water understands civilization well. It wets my foot, but prettily. It chills my life, but wittily. It is not disconcerted. It is not broken-hearted. Well used, it decketh joy. Adorance doubles joy. And ill used, it will destroy. In perfect time and measure, with a face of golden pleasure. Elegantly destroy. Now, this is a poem that has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 and 12 lines. Now, when we are analyzing any poem, the very first thing we do is talk about the rhyme and the rhythm. So the rhyme scheme here, let's understand it. Let's name it understands A. Well is not rhyming with understand, so we call it B. Prettily, it's not matching, we can name it with the letter C. Wittily, they are rhyming. Prettily and wittily, we call it C. Disconcerted and broken-hearted, D and D. Joy, joy, destroy, E, E and E. Measure and pleasure will be F and F. Destroy will also be E. So this is the rhyming scheme of the poem. The poem has used different figures of speech. We can analyze it. You can see how the poem is structured in this way with 12 lines that Ralph Waldo Emerson did, and this is how he structured the poem. We can find the rhyme scheme, we can find different elements of poem in it, and let's talk about the figures of speech. So first thing is that when we are reading it, we can see that we are talking about water, and water is personified. How the figure of speech personification is used. Personification is when we give the non-human things, entities or things, the human-like quality. Like here, personification is also used in lines number 5 and 6 to speak of some of the qualities that water does not have. It never becomes disconcerted, nor does it suffer a broken heart. So we know that hearts, they are always used for humans. Now, we are talking about it in the connotative meaning. We know that water is not a human, so we used the personification. We found out that the personification, water is personified, and it talks about having a broken heart and never becoming disconcerted like humans do. So this way we can say that the figure of speech personification is used, and water is personified by the poet. And this makes it clearly a very good example of a use of figurative language in any poem. Now, yes, we know that poems have symbolism. So when we are symbolizing something or using symbols to have deeper meanings, we can again call it that figurative language is used, because symbolism is also a figure of speech. So now, what does water symbolizes? Water symbolizes life, renewal and purification. We get purified by water. Water gives us life. We drink it and survive on the planet, and the renewal quality of water. In this poem, it can also represent the duality of nature, capable of both nurturing and destroying. How? It depends upon how we use it and how much of water is there. If we are talking about floods, we know that floods have destructive quality. Floods destroy the civilizations, but it also nurtures with vegetation, and it gives us food as well. So the nature of water is dual nature. So you can see that the duality of nature is presented of water. Water is a symbol of life that we always use in our writing and in our speech. So the poet uses it perfectly and uses different symbols that are actually beautifying and clarifying the meaning of the poem. Now, let's look at all these different examples of figures of speech. There are different figures of speech I talked about in the introduction. Simile is a comparison with another thing using the word as or like. Now, Rachel is as bright as what? The sun. So the brightness here Rachel's is being compared as the brightness of the sun. So we have a comparison of equal things, and that's how we can say that this is the use of a simile. Metaphor is a direct comparison. The whole world is a stage. Now, the whole world is being compared with a stage. Why? Because on stage actors perform, and the whole world is also like a stage. You can compare it directly. That the direct comparison is called metaphor, and comparison with the words like and as, they are called similes. Personification, notice the word person in it. Yes, the qualities of a person are given to inanimate objects on other living creatures other than humans or non-living objects. For example, the wind whispered in my ears. We know that whispering is done by humans. If we say that the wind whispers, so we can say that the wind is given quality of whispering, which is a quality of a person, of a human being. So this is an example of personification. Hyperbole, students, this is exaggeration. For example, I am so hungry I could eat a horse. We know that nobody is that much hungry. This is just exaggeration. This is just extended. So this is what we call hyperbole. Oxymoron is the two different things. Euthanizing their sick pet dog was considered as an act of cruelty. Now, or we can say an honest thief. How is a thief honest? This is an oxymoron, because either the person can be honest or he can be a thief or a stealer. So it cannot be both. So this is an example of oxymoron. We have epigrams like the child is the father of a man. This is an example of an epigram. Irony can be also found in different poems and different texts. This is also a figure of speech. A fire station burned down yesterday. Fire stations are supposed to water down the burning buildings or the fire. But if the fire station itself is burned down, this is an example of irony. We will say this is ironic. We have puns like life depends upon the liver. Now, either are we talking about the person who is living it or the liver of a person, biologically speaking, in the body. So it can work both ways. So yes, life depends upon the liver as well, and life also depends upon the person who is living it. Metonymy use, the bench decided that the man is guilty. Synecdoche, we need more hands to help us move this cupboard. So these are the different figures of speech with examples. Some of them are very much common. You may know them or you can use them in daily life. You can observe the usage of these figures of speech in different texts. But some of them are for higher grades as you learn more literature and learn about all these different figures of speech. You can learn them later. All right. So here is line 1 to 4 of a poem by Wordsworth. All you have to do is identify figures of speech. Let's read it. I wandered lonely as a cloud that floats on high over vales and hills, when all at once I saw a crowd, a host of golden daffodils. First, let's find out the rhyme scheme, students. I want your attention. I hope that you can do it really quick. You can pause the video if you're watching on YouTube, and students on Zoom class, just submit your answers in the chat. I wandered lonely as a cloud. Let's call it A. That floats on high over vales and hills. Call it B, because this is not rhyming with A. When all at once I saw a crowd. Cloud and crowd, they are rhyming together. And a host of golden daffodils is rhyming with hills. So we can call it B. So A, B, A, B. This is the rhyming scheme. And let's see, I wandered lonely as a cloud. So, what kind of figure of speech is used over here? Yes, students. Good. This is an example of a simile because the poet is referring and comparing it to a cloud, but not a direct comparison, rather comparison with the word as, that floats on high over vales and hills, when all at once I saw a crowd, a host of golden daffodils. So we can find a use of simile, you can find all these other figures of speech by yourself, read the whole poem and make notes on all the figures of speech that are used by William Wordsworth. Again, we have this example of a stanza from line 1 to 4 by Emily Dickinson. Because I could not stop for death, he kindly stopped for me. The carriage held but just ourselves and immortality. Now, what is the rhyme scheme? A, B, we call it C, and me and immortality is matched, so we call it B. So A, B, C, B, this is the rhyme scheme. And here we can clearly see that the author, the writer, or the poetess, Emily Dickinson, she actually personified death with stopping. And she called it he. He kindly stopped for me. Now, this is an example of personification. So, you can see that in almost all the poems, the very big known poems, you can find different figurative language used. And the techniques, the figures of speech, you have to learn them first, and then you need to learn that how you can identify them in your analysis. So when you're writing explanation or also the critical analysis or the analysis of the figurative language used in a poem, you can apply all the knowledge of figures of speech and talk about each and every figure of speech in the poem as much as you can. And that's how the purpose of the learning outcome is complete. Students, we have a worksheet for you, a question bank, and also this PowerPoint presentation as a resource. And all these resources will be available once the lecture is uploaded. You can get it in the description of the video, and you can share your comments and your suggestions in the comment box below. Students who are listening to us on the Zoom class, you can get the worksheet and the question bank, revisit the lecture, think about figurative language. Do not take it literally, because we know that, for example, death, we cannot call it he's stopping me or anything like that, because this is not meant to be taken literally. Rather, it is meant to be taken figuratively. This is how figurative language works, including different techniques like simile, metaphor, personification. There are symbols that are used in the poem. So in this way, you can clearly see that how the author is using the figurative language. So this is, let's move on to the SLO. We evaluated that how the authors, in this case, the poets, used language and figurative language. So we talked about it. We talked about mostly the possible literary, the figures of speech, and you can easily recognize them and understand them. So I'll see you in the next video lesson, students. I hope that everything is clear. Students, if you have any kind of question right now, you can straight away ask it so that we can wrap up our lesson. Yes. Lukman, is everything clear? Students on Zoom class, are we clear about figurative language, how it is used and what techniques are used? And we can now take any poem and then read it properly and identify the different figures of speech. And you can also give your analysis that why the author or the poet used this specific figure of speech for this verse or for this stanza. See you in the next video lesson, students. Allah Hafiz.